What I chose to talk about is the four kinds, and that's because I'm reading the book called Ahavat Chesed. Ahavat Chesed means love of kindness. Love of kindness. This is a book written about 100 years ago by a fellow by the name of Rabbi Israel Meir HaKohen, better known as the Chafetz Chaim. I don't hear the term Chafetz Chaim. He was very popular for a few things, but he made a major effort. He led I would say it's like a renaissance in Jewish practice with the emphasis on Lashon Hara. Everyone here has heard the term Lashon Hara? Mm-hmm. Right? Everyone knows that term thanks to this man. Like, he wrote books and wrote articles and wrote essays and spent a tremendous effort trying to popularize the ideas, the teachings of the importance of not speaking Lashon Hara, not speaking negatively about other people, and he doesn't know what it means. Lashon Hara means evil talk. Evil talk. And he wrote books on the laws of evil talk, and he wrote books on the more ethical perspectives, and he collected all the sources for it. And this book is a book called about kindness. It's a remarkable book because he makes laws out of ethics. He says, what are the laws of kindness? And half the book he spends on the laws of kindness and the laws of charity and the laws of taking care of people that died, because you have to part of kindness is taking care of people taking care of the dead, and that's called the best kind of kindness you could do is kindness with a dead person, because you're not expecting to have any repayment. It talks about just the importance about caring for others, being kind for others. And what I found remarkable, I've learned it before. I read it like 7 years ago. I'm reading it again, but there were a few things that really struck me. I wanted to share with everyone. So, first thing is that there's a verse in the Torah. More precisely, it says this 8 times in the Torah. V'halachta b'drachav, which means you should go in the ways of God. Anyone heard that statement? 8 times in the Torah it says, man should walk in the ways of God. You should be like God, copy God. And the Talmud says, wait a minute, how is mortal man in any way going to be comparable to God? Right? We're different entities. We're finite, he's infinite. We have a hard time even conceptualizing the idea of God. What is this requirement that we should be like God, walk in God's ways? So what the Talmud tells us is that, the Talmud in several places, that what it means to be like God, to walk in God's ways, it means to act like God, right? God's behavior. God's kind, you should be kind. God's merciful, you should be merciful. So the first thing I want to point out is the idea of kindness and caring for others and being merciful and being someone who's amiable, gregarious, I don't know what the right word is, someone who's kind is so important that it's described as man acting like God. And B, it was so important that it was necessary to write it at least 8 times in the Torah, amongst countless other times and references, but specifically this statement of being kind, right? So many times in the Torah to obviously emphasize the importance of that idea. So that's the first thing that struck me. And the Torah's emphasis on kindness. We'll get to what kindness means, because I think there may be 4 kinds. Okay. The next thing that struck me was, this is once again from this book, the comparisons that the idea of kindness has with the idea of Torah, and specifically studying Torah. Because there's some things that we see a common denominator between only 2 things, between only Torah and kindness, which seem to be very disparate. Yes, studying Torah is an intellectual pursuit, and kindness is obviously interpersonal. It's an activity, it's behavioral. You wouldn't think them to really have much of an overlap. And yet we find that in these 2 areas, there's lots of areas where, lots of examples, I'll give a few examples here, where Torah and kindness are put in one basket. So we're going to try to explain what that means. Let me give a few examples for that. Okay, so we have a statement of the Talmud. If someone wants atonement, someone did something wrong, they want atonement, there's 2 ways they could do it. Through Torah study or kindness. Okay? Another story. The story, it says that the descendants of a fellow by the name of Eli, if you read the book of Samuel, you meet a guy named Eli, and his descendants were cursed that they were all going to die young. And it mentions that there were these 2 descendants of his. One of them engaged in Torah, and therefore he was able to live till 40. And the other one engaged in Torah and kindness, and he lived till 60. Once again, we see the idea of Torah and kindness being ways to lengthen one's life. If someone does Torah or someone does kindness, it's a way for them to lengthen their lives. Okay? Those are the only two things that are mentioned. What else do we have? I'll listen to this. This is shocking. The Talmud says, I'll show you, this was not actually from the book, I remember this is from my own studying. Talmud says in a tractate called Avodah Zarah, book called Avodah Zarah, I'll give you the link if anyone ever wants to check it out. It's fascinating. Someone who studies Torah but doesn't engage in kindness, it's as if they don't believe in God. You can have someone who spends his whole life dedicated towards Torah study, but if he doesn't have, alongside that, parallel to that, doesn't engage in kindness, it's as if he doesn't believe in God, which is this very disturbing statement. How can you say someone doesn't believe in God? How can you, and especially someone who's steeped in Torah study? Torah is the will of God. It's the book that we got from God. It's the instructions. It's God's manual for life. And someone engages his whole life in that, but doesn't engage in chesed and kindness and in being kind to other people, being benevolent, as if they don't believe in God. Well, you could say, maybe you should say, hey, there's something lacking, or he's maybe slightly imperfect, or he needs something to even out, to be more balanced. Say something like that. To say something as striking as he doesn't believe in God, it's trying to get our attention. There's something there. The Torah is clearly telling us that if you have Torah, you must have alongside it kindness as well. What does that mean? But once again, we see Torah and kindness put into one basket. And this one is from my grandfather, of blessed memory. I apologize for this, guys. There's a statement in the Talmud that says that the beginning of Torah is kindness and the end of Torah is kindness. What's the beginning of the Torah? The beginning of Torah, it says, is that the Almighty made clothing for Adam and Eve. So that's kindness. And the end of the Torah is the Almighty buries Moses. Kindness. Right? The beginning, so it's a statement of the Talmud. Beginning of Torah is kindness, end of Torah is kindness. So once again, we see Torah and kindness put together. And we also see is that if you say the beginning of something is X and the end of something is X, you can safely deduce, what would you be able to safely deduce, what would you think you could deduce from that? Desmond? If the beginning of Torah is kindness, the end of Torah is kindness,
trumps everything else.
The whole thing is kindness. Right? That makes sense. Once again, the statement of the beginning to the end of Torah is kindness, Torah itself must be kindness, and this is my favorite one. The Hebrew word for kindness, this one I figure out myself, Gemilut chasadim, that's the full term. Gemilut chasadim. And the Hebrew word for Torah is Torah, obviously. The gematria, everyone knows what gematria is? Numerical value, like every Hebrew letter has a numeral attached to it. So I once did this, like just randomly. I was like 22 years old, and I was just playing around with numbers. And I read this piece of Talmud that says that if you have Torah but don't have gemilut chasadim, you don't have kindness, as if you don't believe in God. I said, you know what? Let me just check these out. And it turns out that both of them are exactly 611. Both of them are exactly 611. The word Torah and the word gemilut chasadim, kindness, are exactly the same. It means these are the two pillars of our faith. So this is what this.
Torah codes,
huh? Well, yeah, it's like Torah codes. Yeah, whatever. This is something I discovered myself. A lot of the Torah codes are somewhat of a stretch, but yeah, I'm not to deny the validity of that. But
what is the Torah code?
Torah codes.
Discovery.
Well, the Torah codes can mean a lot of things. That's why it's an ambiguous term. But Torah codes, the if you hear a negative connotation, it's probably referring to the Torah codes where they try to guess the future by trying to take the letters in the Torah and descramblizing. Like you take a letter and then you skip 822 letters and get to the next letter and skip another 822 letters and another 822 letters. You can get like a message. It's like hidden codes in the Torah. Yeah, they find tons of stuff, but then they find baloney, right? They say, oh, we can find Obama 2012 beat Romney. They find stuff like that all the time. But the science behind it, some peer-reviewed articles say, yeah, it's totally true. Some say it's baloney. They found the same thing in Moby Dick. So there was this one guy who the father. He's like the Bill James of Bible codes. Everyone knows who Bill James is. Bill James is like the father of sabermetrics. Sabermetrics is like advanced statistics. He was like sports and like all the advanced statistics. So this guy in 1994, the father of Bible codes, so he was playing around with this and he found all this cool stuff. He found like Hitler, Nazi, 1939, Auschwitz, like right next to each other. He found like in the codes. And he just found remarkable stuff. And then he was searching Rabin assassination. And he's like, because Rabin was still, Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister of Israel. And he's like, Rabin assassination. He's like, boom, Rabin is going to be assassinated in a month. And the guy started sending letters to him. He's like, I found this in the Bible that says Rabin is going to be assassinated. You better be careful. And he's like, some kook is sending him letters about what's it called. And would you believe it? But a month later, he was assassinated. So that's why this Bible code is always closely tied to this Rabin story. But yeah, like they find September 11th, Osama bin Laden, Al Qaeda, Bush, and Pentagon, all like within like yeah.
Had our trip to Israel. The guy from the Hill, the director of Hill, who was leading it, had all these connections from his 10 years there. So he had us over to the Airbnb's balcony.
Oh, really?
After her husband had been assassinated. And I asked her this question, like, was it hard for her husband to get to the point where he could shake hands with Yasser Arafat when he made the deals? And she said, well, we know it was a very difficult time to shake. This terrible skin disease. And say her security guy motioned to our guy who was videotaping the scene and they confiscated our tape after that.
Oh, that's so funny. She's a tough woman. She's still around. I read her book.
She speaks her mind more than
I read her. I read her autobiography. It was she was like. She was the early Zionist. They're very dedicated. And she wrote that is the only thing that I remember. I wonder why, but she wrote that before the war, before the independence, so if you were like a settler, like a Zionist who was settling in Palestine, if you were caught with any weapons, any firearms, they would hang you. So that's the British mandate over Palestine. And the underground, like the Haganah and the Irgun and the Lehi, all these underground groups, they all needed firearms because they were engaged in this guerrilla warfare with the British. And she would say that the women would they were in charge. The women were in charge of smuggling the weapons back and forth because the British soldiers they would hide them in places that the British soldiers wouldn't was ungentlemanly to I think what she said ungentlemanly to search. So that's how they just managed to smuggle. And yeah, that's you brought up Lara Bin. I read her book 100 years ago, and that's the only thing I remember. Yeah, okay, I apologize for that. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we have this remarkable statement in the Torah that via our actions of kindness, we're able to emulate God. We're able to be like Him, which is a remarkable thing, on its own right. It's repeated multiple times, and that's the first striking thing about kindness, which should compel us to investigate further. But additionally, we see the idea of Torah and kindness being interlinked, and we brought countless examples, not countless, 7 examples. So I wanted to maybe give it an angle to this. And this is something that I developed on my own. It's possible there's other angles. And what I want to argue before we get to the 4 different kinds of kinds, I want to argue that maybe the idea of Torah and the idea of kindness is really the same thing. What do I mean by that? Torah, we say, is the will of God. It's tapping into God's brain, right? It's intellectually connecting yourself with the Almighty. This is His Torah. You should intellectually connect with that. Kindness is also tapping into God, but not into God's brain, but in God's behavior. This is all, so to speak, obviously, God doesn't have a brain. But the point is, in God's intellect and God's behavior. So these are the 2 ways that we can emulate God. we could kind of relate to him, to connect to him, right? Number one, on an intellectual level, study his Torah. Number two, behaviorally. So therefore, these two things together could make us, could propel us, could be an impetus for us to become greater people, godly people, to be like God, to walk in God's ways. And if someone says, I only want to connect on an intellectual level, I only want Torah, well, it's as if they don't believe in God. Why is it as if they don't believe in God? Because they don't believe that God's behavior is worth emulating. Just God's intellect. What do you mean? God is more than just intellect, it's also how he treats us, how he treats humanity. So it's important for you, if you really believe in God, then you would make an effort to try to be like God as well in your behavior. So someone who has Torah but doesn't have kindness means he has the intellect of God, right? He's connecting on an intellectual level to God, but on a practical level, on a behavioral level, right? He's not emulating God. Hence, as if he doesn't believe it. Hence, these two things have to go together. And hence, the Torah starts off with kindness, ends off with kindness, because it's really the same thing. And it's two stages of one process. You have to have your intellect connected on to godly wisdom, but that should also impact your behavior. So this is why I want to. This is the I think maybe the starting point for the discussion about kindness is, hey, we see that kindness is something which is we should walk in the way of God because we could act like God. This is how he acts, and we should follow suit. And the reason why it's so closely tied to Torah is because they're two halves of the entire picture. Right? Through Torah, you intellectually connect to God, and through kindness, well, that's how your behavior emulates the behavior of God. So that's the idea. To me, like, this thing is so groundbreaking. So it's such a broad strokes of everything in our religion. Like, to me, like, it's worth to sit down and say, okay, so what is Torah? What is kindness? And I did that, and it turns out there's actually 4 kinds. Not all kindness is created equal. And when we talk about kindness, we're going to have to always figure out, okay, where exactly on the kindness totem pole. Oh gosh. That happens to me all the time. I apologize. On the kindness totem pole, does our kindness finish? Because when we say kindness, we can mean multiple things. And I think maybe that the kindness that we're describing, that where it just transforms the person, is a much higher level of a simple kindness that we could, that people could use in their vernacular when they just talk about the idea of being benevolent and being kind, being, I'm trying to think of another word for kind, but giving, caring. I guess maybe there's other words. You have another word?
Oh, no, I was actually going to say, because you're talking about kindness, actually coming up a lot. Yay! I was just wondering, does kindness also mean that in the mornings in Texas, you have to say good morning? I was just wondering, is that a kindness thing?
Well, because you find that people aren't friendly in the mornings? How early are we talking about?
Like, I get there for 7 o'clock in the morning, and I like to just, focus and, decompress. Like, I don't want to be like, oh, good morning, and everyone's all like, good morning, and I'm like, you can just say, I was just wondering, is that like a New Year's resolution?
Dana, it's it's going to die off by January 15th. This guy wrote on Twitter that he wants to open up a gym that turns into a bar after January. Because everyone makes these New Year's resolutions. So it'll calm down by February. Don't worry. But
I know. I mean, is that like a kind?
It's Dana. It's the last vestiges of New York that you have within you.
Like, you should at least feel like you just say morning. You don't say good morning.
Just say morning.
I feel you.
I had my first
Really
cup of coffee
upset at
this
me, and it's very hard for me in the morning to remember. I'm like, oh yeah, like I don't think about it, and they think I'm rude. I try to be really nice in the afternoon and be like good morning in the afternoon, but it doesn't work, and I just like,
Dana, I feel your pain. Dana, you'd be like, I'm a New Yorker. Get over it.
They try, and they're like sticklers for this.
Because
she's
Dana,
not saying good morning in the morning, and I'm like, oh, so silly, It's so
Like, what are you?
Sorry, because when Dana started asking the question, I was thinking that the opposite was. I was thinking like she was being all cheerful, and no one else was responding in kind.
I guess I'm just in the morning. I'm just like,
If they say it, respond. And if they don't worry about it.
if I don't say it, they get upset.
She just works on it, too.
I'm trying to work on it.
New Year's resolution.
Okay. I thought maybe is that like, am I not being kind? I'm not saying it. I thought this was
No,
is that on your
it's cultural.
I thought maybe it was on your checklist.
Well, no, because in my 4 kinds, and thank you for bringing it back, Dana. In my four kinds, it's actually it's different kinds of behavior. It's not different aspects of a certain behavior. It's not part of a checklist. It's a whole different perspective. It's 4 kinds of kinds, but really 4. It's just 4 different distinct kinds.
Seems like in terms of like the different kinds of mitzvot. Like there's different.
Right. It's a totally different kind of thing.
It's like a different level.
Exactly. So the first kind. Let's start with the first kind. The first most simple kind, and that is what I like to call a basic human decorum kind. What I mean by that is like this. We have a verse in the Torah that says, Olam chesed yibaneh, which means a world is created with kindness. It means that the idea of a world being functioning is dependent on kindness. If there's no kindness, the world wouldn't be able to function. What does that mean? It means is that as humans, and we're the only ones that this only species that this can be said of, if we don't have kindness, if we don't relate with each other, if we don't give and get, if we don't have interdependence, everyone depending on someone else, we wouldn't be able to survive. Think about it. How many people here sew their own clothing? None, right? Not me? Huh?
So or fix.
Patches. Right? No one here sews their own clothing. Someone else does that for you. Right? How many people here give themselves haircuts? I used to do it.
Every once in a while.
Okay.
Yeah, like a best friend, I do.
Huh? No, like a haircut. But how many parts of our lives, like how many here people actually built their own car?
But you pay for it.
You pay for it. The point is that the only way the human society is with interdependence, right? We have to rely on each other. Otherwise, our society cannot function. This is a basic human idea. The idea is that animals, each animal on its own could survive, as well as they survive in a social setting. Well, I guess that for certain areas, maybe for protection, they travel in packs and how they. Well, yeah, okay. That's true.
On an intellectual level, as far as
Yeah. So obviously, there's my exceptions if you want to split hairs. But the point is that our society cannot function at all, right? Unless we have each other, and that's why kindness is the one mitzvah that is actually it's a mitzvah in the Torah, and the Torah, the mitzvah was given to Jews, but even Gentiles, we demand for them to be kind. It's the only one. It's the only mitzvah that they don't have. It's not one of their mitzvahs, but they're demanded to. Why? Because otherwise society can't function. We have the Sodom and Gomorrah, right? They were not kind, hence they were destroyed. Right? What do you mean? They're Gentiles. They don't have a responsibility. They don't have a requirement to be kind. Yes, they do. This basic kindness, right? This is what enables society to function. If you don't have this, you don't. Society cannot continue. So this is the most basic idea. And this is something which is universal, required by everyone to have interactions with other people, positive interactions with other people. Simple, most basic level. Let's move up a stage. And this is a Jewish trait. The Talmud tells us that there's 3 themes that mark Jewish character. Jewish character is marked by three character traits. Number 1, they're bashful, they're shy. Right? Jews aren't the ones who are like BMOCs, right? Well, maybe some are, but big man on campus. Okay. So they're shy. They're merciful, right? A Jew cannot do genocide. It's not possible. Right? Don't claim that Hitler was Jewish. It's not possible. A Jew can't be cruel. Cruelty is just not a characteristic that we have. And lastly is that we have kindness.
And how did Kahanas exist?
Who, Kahana? Kahana wasn't a cruel person. Sidetracked. He wasn't a cruel person. In fact, he was full of love. Have you heard his tapes? Have you watched his debates with the? Have you watched his videos?
Well,
he was a little bit of a hardliner. That says, listen, Israel's our land, not the Arabs. They should leave. Right? That's why he was a hardliner. But doesn't mean he was a cruel person.
Well, I mean, it wasn't really a.
Plus,
they're considered a terrorist group.
Well, they are considered. That's true. Yeah, and because he had, and would you say that Menachem Begin was also a terrorist? He was also labeled terrorist. Is there anyone here that would claim that Menachem Begin, the wonderful Israeli leader, that was prime minister of Israel, was a terrorist? Was in the Israeli Knesset for 50 years? No one argues he was a terrorist, but the British said he was a terrorist because he blew up the King David Hotel, even though he called up 20 minutes earlier and says, we're blowing it up, and they locked the doors and kept everyone in the British. He called up on the phone. He says, we planted explosives in the basement of your building. It's going to blow up in 20 minutes. Make sure you get everyone out of there. We're doing it. We don't want to have innocent loss of life. We don't want to kill anyone. We want to make a statement that the British, you're persecuting. This is back to the British mandate. You're persecuting the Jews. You're not treating us well. You're doing hangings every day, as the British did. This is only 60 years ago. It's outrageous to think about that. They used to do it all the time. Anyone was caught with any weapons, which hung right there, public. Outrageous. These are British. Could you imagine? They called up and says, get everyone out. The British decides, we're locking the door. No one's allowed to leave. And 87 people died. So they labeled him a terrorist. He's not a terrorist. Right? He to achieve a goal and try to bring the statehood and to try to bring Israel into existence, he had to engage in certain and they were looking for him. And you know what? The people from the Haganah, from Ben Gurion, they wanted him also. They would have shot him also, just like they shot the people in the Altalin. I'm sorry, I'm going to Israeli politics now.
The thing is, if you're warned that your building's about to explode, and you decide to lock the people, technically, aren't
you're the bad one, yeah.
Yeah. You're the one who's causing the death.
It's
bashful,
merciful,
merciful, and kindness.
So it's not like you have to be always 1/3.
No. It means that overall, and this is the next thing I want to say. It doesn't mean that you can't have an Jewish individual who's not kind. Of course, you could find that, but generally, the characteristic that we say that that characterizes Jews is these three things. That's what the Talmud says, and the explanation behind that, this is interesting. We actually have in Judaism the first documented hypothesis or thesis or theory of evolution, and the idea of someone acquiring traits and transmitting them to their future generations. The basic structure of evolution, where someone could change in a certain capacity or other, and then transmit that further. And we claim is that this could also be on spiritual or behavioral matters, not just physical matters. And obviously that's something which is the idea of behavior being hereditary is something that I think everyone agrees with now. Anyone disagrees with it. And what we say is that whatever Abraham, our forefather, right, whatever he accomplished in his life, and we know he excelled in these things. Kindness, we know Abraham was a kind person. All the stories about his kindness. Those things became part of his DNA. Maybe his spiritual DNA. And that's the Jewish people even today. That's why the Jewish people are always driven to save the world. If you look at major organizations that are there to help people, they're all headed by Jews. And even young Jews. Yeah, young Jews today, the millennials. We're all millennials here, right? And, well, yeah. Okay, whatever. Young Jews today are still driven to change the world and make the world a better place. Why? It's in their blood. It's in their DNA. We have interesting. The idea is brought home in the chapters of the Fathers, which is a section of the Mishnah, one of the 63 books of the Mishnah. It has two successive statements talking about Abraham. One of them, it says that there's 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. And the next one it says, in 10 challenges was Abraham, our forefather, challenged. And the commentaries asked, wait a minute, we just said 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, and we didn't call him Abraham, our forefather. Just called him Abraham. But then it says there's 10 challenges that Abraham was challenged, and we call him Abraham, our forefather. Abraham Avinu, Abraham, our forefather. How come in 2 successive Mishnahs he's called different names? So one of the commentaries' answers is that because when Abraham faced challenges, he achieved certain spiritual characteristics, and in those things were transmitted to his descendants. Hence, when we talk about the challenges that Abraham faced, he's Abraham, our forefather, because he was the one who started the trend that continues to this day that Jews are kind people. So how is this a different level of kindness? This is a different level of kindness because it's in our nature. Naturally, we're driven to be kind. We need to do for others, right? And that's a Jewish trait. And you may have a hard time wrapping your head around that because we're Jewish and that's what we know. But if you compare Jewish communities and Jewish individuals with non-Jewish communities and non-Jewish individuals, it's remarkable the difference. If you grow up in something, it's like you're zoomed into the forest, right? All you see is what you know. It's kind of hard to compare with something you don't know. But if you are able to have a bird's eye view of a Jewish community anywhere, and a non-Jewish community, and the charity and the kindness and the initiatives and the organizations that are driven to help people in the Jewish community are astounding. And you do find a certain degree of charitable, of philanthropy, of the Billionaire's Pledge, of kindness amongst non-Jews as well, but nowhere near nowhere near the intensity, nowhere near the universality that you find by Jews. So that's another idea, is that Jews were driven to do kind naturally. And then we kind of have a need to do kind, and we're on the lookout, so to speak. We're on the prowl to do kindness. That's the second level. What's the third level? Third level is where, imagine someone wants to do kindness. Why do you want to do kindness? Well, I'm Jewish. I want to do kindness. That's what I was taught. I was taught about tikkun olam. Everyone heard that term because that's a term that we don't taught as kids. Because that's what our parents were taught. Because that's what it says in the Torah that we're here to fix the world, and that's something that we have naturally, and it's something that's easy for us to swallow because we're Jews and we're descendants of Abraham. There's a higher level on that as well. And what's that? The third level of kindness, in ascending order. That is. Well, I guess in descending order. And that would be when someone does kindness, not because they're compelled to do it because of their nature or their innately or their community. They want to do it because the Almighty says to do it. Right? And this is what I found remarkable. This is once again back from this book. He says that there's a certain degree. He says that this is for special people. So I don't know if it's really for me or for anyone, or it's for all you guys, but it's for sure not for me. But it says someone who already does kindness. In their head, if they could ask themselves, why am I doing this? And try to find a way to make it that they're doing it because this is what the Almighty wants. You're doing it regardless. But if you could stop yourself and try to change your motives and say, I'm doing it because this is the will of God, that's a very special level. To take something you're doing anyhow, and to not try to make it better or improve it, it's just to try to channel certain motivation. That's not a natural motivation that we have. But to try to channel that motivation into our activities, that's really special. To do kindness and say, I'm not doing it for this, I'm doing it for that. I'm doing it because God told me to do it, because this is the will of God. With this, I'm becoming close to Him. With this, I'm following in His footsteps. That's a remarkable level of kindness. So we have there's a doppelganger for that. We talk about honoring your parents, and this is something that makes a lot of sense. And if you're looking at it from the other side, you're a parent, and you know what you actually give for your kids. And I know it's like some parents even wake up in the middle of the night to tend to their kids. I don't know. I heard rumor, I guess. But parents give up everything for their children. It only makes sense to honor them. You listening, kids? Okay. It makes sense. It's just basic. It's to be a mensch. You parents did so much for you. It cost $238,000 to raise a kid till 18. not including summer camps or college or braces. It's very expensive, and it's lots of dedication, lots of toil, lots of hard work, lots of worrying, carpool. It's so much. It only makes sense to honor your parents. That's very logical. Makes a lot of sense. And you know what? In our Talmud, it says even Gentiles do it. It makes sense. It makes sense. And you find this remarkable story about this one Gentile who lived in Israel, who was. It gives 4 stories. I'm not going to go through the stories right now to save some time. It's getting a little late, I know. But it says 4 remarkable stories about this one Gentile and how he did kindness. Like, his parents treated him terribly, and still not kindness. He honored his parents. And it says that his reward was he got a red heifer born in his flock. And this is the one of 2 times where it says red heifer, and it puts it together with honoring parents. And I found another place in the Talmud. It talks about this and talks about that. It talks about honoring parents and talks about red heifer. I'm thinking, what could possibly be the connection between a red heifer, the mitzvah of a red heifer, which is the most illogical of mitzvahs, or at least from our perspective, and honoring parents? Doesn't seem to have much of a correlation. And I saw someone answer this, that in truth, the lesson here is that you can honor your parents. Why are you honoring your parents? You could either do it because, hey, it makes sense, all right, or they'll beat me otherwise, or just derech eretz, or it's menschlichkeit, right? You could be like a Gentile. Even a Gentile does it, right? Or you can say, I'm doing it because this is the will of God. And I'm doing it the same way I would do the red heifer. I don't understand at all why I do the red heifer. The red heifer is used as the model of a chok, of a mitzvah that humans can't wrap their heads around. And the lesson is that, to a certain degree, these 2 things are together. The aim should be is that even things that I know why I'm doing them, there's a higher level to say I'm doing this the will of God. Similarly, with regards to kindness, the 3rd kind is when someone does kindness and he doesn't do it because he's naturally inclined to do it, right? And even though he would do it otherwise, it's for him to re-engineer his activity to say that I'm doing it for this motivation and not for any other reason. I'm doing it because that's what God wants, right? And that's a degree of kindness which is able to transform a person even more. And lastly, the 4th kind, the highest level of kindness, and the highest level of kindness is where a person is able to totally change their perspective on everything in life. As humans, from day one, we're innately selfish. I've said this a million times, I'll say it again. A small child rarely wakes up to tend to his crying mother. It never happens. Children are selfish. All they care about is themselves. They want pleasure, they don't want pain, and that's all they care about, and that's how they're born. And over the course of their lifetime, the hope is that they'll actually be able to see others and care for others. And the highest level of kindness is when someone is able to re-engineer, I've said that word before, but to totally revamp their perspective on life. To stop seeing things from their own perspective and try to see the world from someone else's perspective. To see the world the way someone else sees it.
But it's not a switch, right? It's a process.
Obviously, it's a process, for sure. And a person, through kindness, through acting kindness, could totally transform their relationship to everything else in life. Right? For example, I said this a couple of weeks ago. We see a story about Rebecca. I mentioned this a few weeks ago. Rebecca, when in the Torah, where it talks about Rebecca and how they looked for someone who was kind to marry Isaac, and we mentioned there that they asked Rebecca, "Could you please give us some water?" And she said, "No, not only am I going to give you water, I'm going to give your camels water." The point is that she was able to see the world from someone else's perspective. That's the highest degree of kindness. The highest degree of kindness is someone someone acts in a way where they're able to see the world from someone else's perspective. This will change their relationships with other people, change the relationship with God himself. If someone just sees the world from their perspective, if someone is held captive, if someone is tethered to the imagery that they had as a child, right? They're in this little box and they're not able to see anything out, right? They don't have this little window to see other people and see what someone else is going through. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. If they're not able to do that, a certain degree, every aspect of their relationships will also reflect that perspective.
Is it right that the kindness is the actions that flow from that perspective of empathy?
Well,
not the perspective of empathy themselves?
Well, but the point is that someone could do kindness and it could fit into one of those levels. Someone could do kindness and just and not actually have it transform them, because it could be at the first level of kindness where they're just doing it because it's the right thing to do, because it's just otherwise we don't have a functioning society. But I think it's all about the motivation. And yes, there are certain acts of kindness that someone won't do unless they have that higher degree of kindness, like
loving kindness. Like if she had just had the perspective to have empathy.
Yes, yes. The act
also needed water, but only gave water
right
to him. That wouldn't have been kindness.
Right. The act demonstrated that she has that high degree of kindness that she's able to see the world from someone else's perspective.
Obviously, just the motivation without the act isn't going to be anything.
Right.
Yeah, and the point is that not every act of kindness would be able to, demonstrate which one of the kindness that someone would fit into. But I feel like I ran through this last one, and I did that on purpose because I don't want to speak too long. But the last idea of kindness is a new life's perspective, where someone is able to see the world from someone else's perspective. To not just say, oh, someone needs something, I give it to them. To be preemptive. Preemptive kindness is only possible if you notice what someone else is going through before they even before you're presented with a kindness situation. You're ahead of the game. You're preventative because that's how you see the world. You see the world from other. You see someone. You say, "Oh gosh, what are they going through? How can I help them?" This new perspective will totally and radically change one's view on life. It opens up a window in their heart. They're able to connect to other people. They're able to connect to God as well.
I have a question. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I like where you're going with that. But what if you're trying to think about what they're going through, but you don't know really what they're going through because you've never experienced that? How can you help them?
So then,
ask them, like, I don't know what you're going through, but how can I help you?
I think once you see the world from their perspective, you'll learn to pick up cues. You'll see someone suffering. You see someone's like, oh gosh, you're in a bad mood. Right? Sometimes you're in a bad mood and you hope someone notices. Right? Yeah, I'm in a bad mood and no one notices because people aren't used to seeing the world from my perspective. So yeah, there might be some things that, oh gosh, I cannot figure out.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be that specific.
Yeah, you might not be able to have.
Oh, I know you're going through a bad time.
Maybe your coworkers aren't sympathetic to the fact that you're
No. I just a lot of people go through things and they bring it to the workplace and I'm trying to figure out how I can implement this because I think this is great. But when they're talking about their divorce, I can't help them.
But no.
I feel like just venting it is great. I'm a great ER at lunchtime, yay. But is there something else?
No. So like this, do you care about them? No, really.
No.
Do you
It's
really?
a hard question.
No, the question's like this.
I do. I like
If
them
you
all.
care.
No, not like.
I know you
Not like.
smart,
Means.
smart.
I mean, not like. Do you care for them? Does when they have pain? Do you feel a little bit of their pain?
I feel bad. Of
You
course.
feel- no.
I feel terrible.
Rebecca didn't have camels.
She didn't have camels, but she was able to put herself in their shoes.
I don't know what to do. I tried to
Well,
put myself in that shoe, and I'm like,
think about it, Dana.
I
What
don't do
would
what she's doing either.
what would you do if you were going through a challenging situation? Right?
Not do what
So the
she's doing, but I don't want to tell her. You know what I mean? I don't want to be like, well, this is what that's not helpful.
No, right, but so think about it. You're her. Imagine you're her. What do you need?
Want if
Yeah,
you
what would you want?
What would you want if you were going through a similar situation? What would you want? Would you like if
She might not necessarily want advice either.
then that's like what you're doing.
That's what I've been doing.
So there you
That
go.
might be the answer.
That might
So-
be the answer.
So Dana, ask yourself: if I was her, if I was in her shoes, what would I want? It may be advice. It may be water for my camels. Right? It may be advice for water for my camels. Or just like a good hug. Right? Or it's just some love, attention, empathy.
Or maybe go to happy hour after work. Like, hey.
Or maybe just say good morning every day.
Let's look at that every time.
Her husband never said good morning. That's why she's getting divorced. So.
No, I wish it were that simple. I know too much.
Tell us more.
I don't want to know anything.
So that's that. So that's the 4 kinds. So today we learned the paramount importance of the idea of kindness. When someone's kind, they're able to emulate God. They're able to walk in God's path, which is how remarkable that is. And kindness is one half of the whole thing that really everything about our religion and our philosophy is trying to impart on us. Right? Number one, on an intellectual level, but also to have that integrate our actions, our activities, our behavior, and to become different people. And kindness is a category of acting is in a way it's similar to God. Hence, those 2 things are indispensable because that's part of the whole message. If you have Torah without kindness, well, you're missing the boat. The whole idea of Torah is to tap into God's intellect. How can you do that and ignore the way God behaves, right? I.e., the kindness. And we learned that not all kindness are created equal. There's somewhat of an ascending, like maybe a roadmap or workbook or work perspective of how we could actually just be mindful about the kindness and realize that really that on a certain degree we all have kindness because we're all humans, we all need each other. But there's higher levels. There's ways to make sure that, or there's stages of kindness where someone does it naturally. And as Jews, we have a hard head start with that as being descendants of Abraham. But also we have to do something because it's the will of God. I'm doing God's work. Think about how empowering that is. And lastly, hopefully the end game is that when someone becomes like Rebecca, someone is able to see the world from someone else's perspective, which is a great challenge, something which is tremendously difficult, but something that it's all attainable, it's within our reach. And those were my thoughts. And I'm so happy that y'all came and participated. And thank you so much, Chai, for providing the wonderful, delicious food. And yes, it breathes life into the frozen tundra of Houston, Texas.
It's not frozen yet, okay?
It was 30 degrees this morning.
No,
it's the road.
Yeah, well, it's 25.
This is Karma. I was texting my dad to get the temperature of it was on Saturday, and like they're dealing with a blizzard up there.
Yeah.
It's 28 degrees.
What is it? 58 in Philly?
Yeah, when I got
Was that negative 58?
No, in New York now it's 60 degrees.
Oh, how'd that happen so
Not where
fast?
my parents are. They're just but like tomorrow or like this week it's supposed to go down to like